Let's turn now to Genesis and chapter 6 and verse 8. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 8. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. And then down to verse 17. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life from under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die, but I will establish my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark. To keep them alive with you, they shall be male and female. Birds according to their kinds, animals according to their kinds, creeping things, 2 of every sort shall come to keep them alive. The covenant that God made with Noah. We have seen the covenant of life and how it was broken. And we have seen that then God initiated the covenant of redemption, or the covenant with Adam. And that anticipated the coming of the seed of the woman, the deliverer. And now God has moved in and he makes a covenant with Noah. Before we get to that covenant, I want us to have a context of when that covenant was made. What was it that gave rise to the covenant? Now, first of all, go back to chapter, where are we? Yeah, chapter 3 and verse 20. You'll find that is at the end of what we talked about in our last hour. The blessings and the curses that came upon a broken covenant of life, the blessings that God now gives in terms of the new covenant he made with Adam that will bring redemption. And then in verse 20 and 21, it says, the Lord God made for Adam and his wife garments of skins and clothed them. In a very real sense, that is the finale of the covenant with Adam. Because right there you have, with very little thought, the shedding of blood. It doesn't say so, but you've got to think a second and you got it. You remember this thing with clothing. As soon as they sinned, Adam and Eve, it says, made themselves clothes of fig trees. I'm sorry, of fig leaves, not fig trees. And so they were clothed. When God gave the blessings and the curses that we went through, they were clothed before him in fig leaves. Then at the end, as they're going out now into this new world of death and curse, God gives them skins to clothe themselves with. Now, honestly, I don't think anyone seriously thinks that God is interested in the kind of clothes you wear. In terms of, God doesn't like fiber, so he said, get rid of the fig leaves. I'm into furs, so you wear skins. I don't think that's the issue. God is not telling us that it would be good if we all wore fur coats. It's got nothing to do with it. You're dealing with something far deeper here. When they fell and they made for themselves clothes of fig leaves, why? It says because they were ashamed. They realized their nakedness. Now, what has happened? Death has come on the inside. They're now living, but they're dead. And that brings with it the shame of what I have done before God, but also now shame in the presence of another human being. And also, I suggest to you, I can only do that, also the shame that came from losing their clothes. It says they were naked, that is, they didn't wear clothes, but I suggest to you that they were not naked in that they didn't have a covering. Isn't it strange that man, Lord of creation, made in the image of God, is the only creature that isn't born with a covering? I find that very fascinating. I mean, even birds get feathers, and it doesn't have to buy them. It's there. All animals are born with some kind of covering, whether it's there or start, is going to get there pretty quickly. Only man, the one that is the peak of creation, made in God's image, we're the only ones who aren't born with clothing, and it will never grow. I suggest to you that man originally was clothed with glory, the radiance of God's glory, something akin to what we saw in Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, that there radiated out from his innermost person a light, a whiteness. Man lost his glory and immediately stood there in the present condition of man, which to him at that time is naked. And immediately, to cover the shame of his sin, of the death that has overtaken him, resulting in my suggestion of lost glory, he then makes clothes out of fig leaves. That is, he does something to cover it over, or to pretend it isn't there. I've lost the glory, so now let's pretend I haven't. Let's produce our own covering. And God comes with this covenant to Adam and says, you cannot cover it over. There is nothing you can do that will take away the shame. A covenant has been broken. And if we now continue the death that you incurred by breaking the covenant of life, that death has got to be met. We're not playing games. Right? In the day you eat, you should die. Adam didn't die, then who did? Who did? God can't sweep it under the rug. His grace may say, we shall continue, and I'll bring you back. But in the meantime, a covenant has been broken, and God cannot sweep the results under the rug. So if Adam and Eve did not die, if the race isn't wiped out, who does die? It says, he clothed them with skins, and he said that is an adequate covering. If we're talking about covering as in clothes, fig leaves do just as well. He was talking about a deeper covering of a deeper shame. And he said, in order for that, it's got to be skins. If you get the skin of an animal, the animal has to die first. Simple. You'll never wear a skin unless the blood of an animal has been shed. When he clothed them with skins, he was the one, God was the first one to kill anything on this planet. The first blood to stain the earth of this planet was shed by God when an animal was killed in order that Adam and Eve may be clothed. They said, we feel the shame of our sin. I'll do something to cover it. God said, all that you do can never cover it. Only when another dies in your place. The covenant of life has been broken. Death is the result. Some animal must take your place. It must die. The covenant demands must be satisfied. Blood must be shed. And as a result of a substitute animal dying instead of you, you then can be clothed with its skin. That's adequate. For that skin is an announcement that blood has been shed. Covenant satisfied. Do you follow what I'm saying here? And so you tie in the shedding of blood that gave them the covering for their shame with that covenant to Adam. And in that, I believe, Abel knew what to do when he wanted to come to God. He killed a lamb. And Hebrews 11 says that when he killed the lamb and offered it to God, he did it by faith. That's important. Faith, by definition, is a response to something that's said. You're here this morning because I said I would be here. You didn't have that nonsense faith that stood outside the door and says, Malcolm, 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 Malcolm. And if I confess fast and long enough, I'll get it. No, you won't. You can confess it all you like. I won't be here. Not unless I said I would be here. Then you can have faith. Only when I've said something can you respond to it. Faith is a response. If Abel offered a lamb by faith, says Hebrews 11, he must have been responding to something. What was he responding to? The announcement in the covenant with Adam that if ever you'll come to God, then you'll come by the blood of an animal shed. Then you can come. That's why Abel's offering was accepted. Cain offered the fruit of the ground. Isn't that interesting? God had just cursed the ground. He brought the fruits of the curse. How did he get the vegetables? By the sweat of his brow. Where did sweat come from? The curse. Cain brought the fruits of the curse and said, look what I have done for you. I'm giving you the curse. Abel came by faith with the blood of a lamb and is accepted. Do you get the picture? So here you had the gospel in embryonic form in that early part of Genesis. They then move out and you have the beginning of the human race, and we don't have much here. Do you realize between Genesis 1 and Genesis 11, right, the first 11 chapters of Genesis cover as much time as the rest of the Bible? Okay, so we've got just a half a verse spans years and years and years and years. And so when we deal with this part of the human race, 99% we don't know anything about. The Holy Spirit has chosen certain specific details that we should know. The rest is none of your business. It was another civilization. It was another race in one sense. And we know enough to let us know why there was a flood. Of course, you find the rapid degeneration of the race. When they go out into their rapid degeneration into sin, I have to ask, what did they really know? What did they expect? Here, Adam and Eve have a promise. They have a promise that there shall be the seed of the woman who one day would smash the head of Satan. They know that. That's their hope. That's their gospel. That's their whole Bible. That sentence. That's it. And they know that that deliverer shall have his heel bruised. They know that. And so they've tied the woman shall have a son, and the son will destroy. But I see, what did they mean by that? What did they understand by that? And I'm not sure, but I find it very interesting that when Cain was born, in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, notice it says, now Adam knew his wife Eve, she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Now, if Genesis chapter 1 through 11 covers the same amount of time as the rest of the Bible, that is a very funny thing to say. I mean, we're cramped for space, right? I mean, you've got to cram in these so many years of history. And so Cain is born. Now, Eve is not recorded as saying anything else. I mean, this is really important. I mean, the lady's talking. Okay. After the fall, this is it. Out of all the years she lived, we have got one sentence. Now, I don't think that if it is what it sounds like, that it's in the maternity room and she said, it's a boy. So it sounds like, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. I don't think God would count that important enough to record. Do you follow what I mean? The lady said, it's a boy. Write that down. They've got to know that 5,000 years from now. No, it's pretty obvious it's a boy. I don't think it's important. The margin of your Bible, I find, is important. The margin of your Bible says, I have gotten a man, the Lord. Do you hear that? So it's a very awkward verse to translate. And so to try and make some sense, the translator says, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. The Hebrew doesn't say that. The Hebrew, which is awkward to translate into English, says, I have gotten a man, the Lord. The Emphasized Bible puts it this way, I have gotten a man, even Yahweh, or the Lord. What it says there in the original, which is awkward, but what it amounts to is that as Cain is born, Eve says, I've got the man. That is the deliverer he talked about. I've got the man. And apparently understood far more than we can read in what has gone before, in that she said, this man is none other than the Lord himself come to deliver us. Do you follow? Could it be that Eve is understanding dimly that when the deliverer comes, he will be none other than the Lord himself, yet born of a woman, who has come to deliver. Can you follow my question? Do you understand at least my question? She certainly did think that Cain was the promised. Little did she know what was going to happen before the promised one would come. But she thought the first son born, this is he. But this, I think, is important. It was important enough to be recorded, that they believed in that promise. The coming one, the deliverer, they lived for that moment. And it's passed on. Throughout the human race, they lived with that hope and that promise. I find that that emerges again in Genesis 5:29, when Lamech has a little boy. He calls the little boy Noah. And the word Noah means rest. And he says in verse 29 of that chapter, this little boy, I'm calling him Noah, because he shall give us rest from our work, from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which the Lord has cursed. So he thought Noah was the promised deliverer. He said the curse brought labor and sweat and pain and exhaustion. Maybe this one, this little boy, he will be the one to turn the curse around and bring us rest. He was mistaken, of course. Noah, in fact, took them through the flood. So in that sense, he brought about a deliverance. I put those two things in to say that those who retained a faith in God, there were these little specks of light to tell me they were expecting that deliverer to come and expecting him in their lifetime. They didn't realize how long they'd have to wait. But I say it to say the kind of faith that was exhibited at that time. Now, on the other hand, you've got the rapid degeneration of sin. And so sin is getting worse and worse and worse by the day. Rapidly. Incredibly rapidly. And there's these specks of light in the darkness. Look at Cain. And compare it with the original sin. Compare it with Adam and Eve. Now, Cain, he's their first son. I mean, we haven't moved far from the original. Cain committed sin, murder, with premeditation after he'd been warned. He gets upset with his brother Abel. He's angry. God warns him and says, why is your face fallen like that? You're in danger. Sin wants to get you. You've got to get sin first. So he's premeditated after he's been warned. After he's murdered his brother, he denies that he has. God says, where is your brother Abel? And is defiant. Basically tells God to get lost. He says, am I my brother's keeper? He mocks out the very idea of the law of love. And afterward, he begs God to put a sign on him so that he will not be judged. That is, I'm not concerned about the fact I murdered my brother. That's beside the point. I'm scared of the consequences. So here is a man who is only concerned with the consequences of his sin, laughs at the idea of love, defiant against God because of his premeditated act of murder. Adam's sin is a Sunday school picnic by comparison. Adam is mild. I mean, Adam was afraid of God. Cain says, get lost. Adam could hardly be said to be premeditated. He fell into it. Do you see how rapidly, in one generation, sin spreads? And then, of course, Abel is killed and is replaced by Seth. Now, to understand chapters 4 and 5, in fact, the next number of chapters in Genesis, you must realize there are two lines. Now, get this very carefully. There are two lines. The one is the line of Cain. And the line of Cain is that which goes spiraling downward and downward into sin. On the other hand, you have the line of Seth, who replaced Abel. And although he becomes mixed up with the line of Cain, is involved in their sin to a point of useless lukewarmness, but it is within the line of Seth that I have those who still believed in the promise, clung to the idea of the deliverer, and comes finally to Noah, and they go through the flood and become the line who produces Jesus. Is that straight in your mind? I don't want to talk too quick. I'm very familiar with this, and I know some of you, bless your hearts, have never read Genesis 4 and 5. It's one of those fascinating chapters that Seth begat, and he begot, and he had so many kids and died, and he begat, and he begot. Oh, that's fascinating. But I know it's not bedtime reading, and I'm sure that some of you haven't. So forgive me if I tend to go fast. But there are two lines. Cain, they spiral into sin. From Seth, they're not much better. But at least within them, they have a clinging to the promise. The names of the people that are mentioned in those chapters are not the only people on earth. You know, anyone who said, where did Cain get his wife, has never read the Bible. Because it doesn't say Cain and Abel were the only kids that Adam and Eve had. It said they had many others. It's just that they're none of your business. They don't enter into this thing. Right? You ever read that? It said many. Where did Cain get his wife? His sister, of course it was. We all come from Adam and Eve, so actually we're all physical brothers and sisters somewhere back there. Cain got his wife from among his sisters, but he had tons to choose from. Right? There's plenty of them. And so you have a vast spreading abroad of the human race. Vast spreading abroad. The only ones that are mentioned in these chapters are those that are key figures in the unfolding of that history. And you'll read there the line of Cain of city building. They were the ones with creativity. They were inventors. And they're the ones that built the great cities, which became the concentration of sin. Interesting. And there arose one particular person, which I just throw out as giving it's like taking the pulse of this generation. His name was Lamech. And he is recorded as singing a song. That's interesting. If you're going to record 2,000 years of history, take it from now back to Jesus, 2,000 years of history, and you've got to pick one song that will tell the pulse of the generation, the race. This is how they felt. I mean, this song is important. And it says his song was that if Cain was avenged, don't worry, anybody who touches me, who dares to touch me, I'll avenge myself. It was as if he sang the song with a sword in his hand and said, the sword of power, this is my God. And even Cain was concerned that God would put a sign on him lest he be hurt for his sin. Lamech says, I don't need a sign, I'll look after myself. So this is complete defiance of God. His God, in fact, is power. He has no sense of God in terms of protection at all. He is his own. No sense of sin. I find that is the thing about today. You know, when you and I were growing up, we did know that when we did wrong, it was wrong. You know. So it doesn't mean we didn't do wrong. We were as expert at it as anybody, but we at least knew we were doing wrong. Whereas because of the philosophy taught today, most of your children do not know that wrong is wrong. That's the point. They might do the same things, but they have no sense that it's wrong. It's every man for himself to do his own thing. I've become my own God. That's the difference between today and yesterday. And that was the difference between Lamech and even Cain. Cain is bad news compared with Adam, but Lamech, forget it. They're on the way to the flood. Because Lamech does not know the difference between right and wrong. He boasts in his wrong. In that immediate time, you'll read of music makers. Interesting. Music was placed and was brought to a high stage of invention by those who wanted to celebrate iniquity. They sang of their sin, and their instruments helped them do it. And so music was brought in order to celebrate evil. They were artists. It was the Bronze Age. They were cattle raisers, vast ranches. It's the introduction of polygamy. Lamech had more than one wife. Interesting that the women are even named there. If you read the genealogies of the Bible, women are not named. The men are. This time women are named. The suggestion is that women had undue attention by men. And without getting into it at all, there is an apparent demonic activity in the human race. The spiraling downward and downward and downward. Now, within that civilization, there was the other line. Those who descended from Seth. Are you with me? You follow me? There's all the people who could trace themselves back to Cain, and then to Adam and Eve, and then all those that trace themselves back to Seth, and then to Adam and Eve. And there, as I say, you had within them, not all of them, but within them you had those who clung to the promise. They were believers. Not many, but within them. And you come immediately to Enoch. That is interesting, for Enoch lived at the same time as Lamech, who sang his song of defiance to God. And Enoch apparently was like anybody else, but it says that when his son was born, he began to walk with God. That's significant. Why should he begin to walk with God when his son was born? See, this is how you should read those genealogies, like Sherlock Holmes. Ask questions. Now it says, Enoch lived so many years and had a son, called him Methuselah, and when his son was born, he began to walk with God. Now that means something happened when his son was born that made him suddenly sit up. And from that day on, he walked with God, and walked with God so beautifully he never died. He just went on to be with God. I think the name that he named his son tells me everything. He named him Methuselah. Do you know what the word Methuselah means? It's a long, funny name, and it means a lot too. The name Methuselah means, when he is dead, it shall come. When he is dead, it shall come. Evil has come to its height. Lamech sings his song of defiance. God says, enough, enough. And he said to Enoch, when this little child dies, that is the flood of judgment, will come. And Enoch is suddenly brought face to face with the transitory nature of life. The fact that everything I see now will be destroyed. And he then begins to walk with God. You see, he had a revelation of truth, reality. And he named his child by that funny name. When he is dead, it shall come. God says, I'm giving the human race the length of this person's life. And when he is dead, it will come. I love that. I love it. Do you know, when one individual was chosen by God to be the limit of God's patience, right? You follow me? God says, I'm going to have so much patience with the human race, and it's going to be vested in this kid's life. For when he dies, it's all over. So my patience will last as long as he lives. And that person lived longer than any other human being. I love that. That's God. That's God. That's God. He invested his long suffering in this one individual's life. And Methuselah lived and lived and lived and lived and lived. And by the end, they must have been going up to see if he was awake every morning. I mean, when he is dead, it shall come. And the year that Methuselah died, the flood came. And the son of Methuselah was Lamech, the one who thought that his son Noah was the promised deliverer. But of course he wasn't. And Noah has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, things, as I say, got worse and worse, in that good seemed to have no effect upon evil. None. Because evil almost swallows up the good. Until you come to the ultimate minority. You've got old Methuselah that everybody expects to drop dead any minute. And his son Lamech and his son Noah, 3 sons, give them all a wife, and that's it. There's none other. And Methuselah and Lamech are going to die, which leaves us with the one family, Noah, in the midst of this civilization. I mean, you're not talking about a bunch of cavemen here. Here were vast cities, inventions, an earth totally populated. In that they'd obeyed God, be fruitful, multiply, fill the whole earth. They had. And in that whole earth, there's this one family. And it says, of all that bunch, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And the word favor means grace. God deals with him in grace. And grace simply means that God deals with us as we do not deserve. God deals with us unmerited. He deals with us, in fact, the reverse of what we deserve. So whatever I find in Noah, I cannot pat Noah on the back for it. Noah helplessly responded to the God of grace, and God worked his miracle inside of Noah. Right? Noah is one of those that was spoken of about the enmity, the seed of the woman that should have enmity against Satan. Supernatural. God said, I will put it there. So Noah responded to God. I know he responded to God because in Hebrews 11 it gives a secret. It says, by faith, Noah. So Noah had made the response to a God who deals with us in grace. That's the secret of Noah's life. And it said he was a righteous man.